What's up, fellow music nerds? Matrix here, and you are locked into the Matrix Music Review Podcast, the only place to get your fix for country and alternative music. And it is Alternative Week. We got a bunch of new albums to check out, especially some ones that I didn't really give a full review to in the past or didn't even get to. Those will be on this podcast. Got a bunch of new singles to talk about and a bunch of new tours to talk about as well. I'm excited to talk to you guys about some of those tours that have been announced this past week. As always, head on over to Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok and give us a follow at Matrix Music Review. Head on over to Spotify, like our playlist. They'll be linked in the description of this episode. And if you like what we're doing on Apple or Spotify, give us a 5-star rating, leave us a comment. Let me know if there's something that you want me to listen to, an artist you want me to check out that I haven't checked out yet. And make sure that you are sharing this podcast with your friends and family so that we can continue to grow this community and let everybody know about all the great new music that is being released. With that, we're going to jump right into our album reviews with our first one, But Here We Are by the Foo Fighters. I have to start this review off with mentioning that this is obviously our first body of work that we are getting from the Foo Fighters since the death of Taylor Hawkins. Josh Freese now on the drums. And you know, I gotta say that this was an emotional listen for me. I've been a huge Foo Fighters fan since the beginning, always been one of my top bands, and, you know, this was a hard one to listen to, obviously, without Taylor on drums. You know, they still sound exactly the same, but you know that there's just a little bit that's missing in terms of the original composition. But reviewing this album for what it is, I really do think that the Foo Fighters are the gold standard for rock right now. I think that if you are looking at who some of the giants in the rock scene are, Foo Fighters got to be right up there with the top names in that genre. This is a album, I think it's 12, 13 songs. It does everything you would expect a Foo Fighters album to do. And this album really is one of those that, like I said, it was so emotional for me, but it was emotional because when you dug down deep into the lyrics of these songs, you could feel the emotion that Dave and the rest of the band really put behind these tracks. Now, a lot of these tracks can have a meaning for, you know, heartbreak or things like that, but knowing what they've been through over the past few years and knowing what they've gone through as a band and in their personal lives with this tragedy that struck them, it's hard not to think that some of these songs aren't about that heartbreak that they went through as a band and about this transition that they've gone through. Under You is one of my favorite songs of the year. It gives me a little bit of Learn to Fly vibes from them, kind of pushes me back into that period of the Foo Fighters. And it's like I said, these all really just felt like they could be considered tributes to Taylor, which I love. I love that they were able to pour that emotion into these tracks and really give the fans something that they can connect with. And I think that's something that's really happening. You know, I've seen a lot of people talking about this album and saying that this is their best line of work yet, and this is the best Foo Fighters that we've ever seen. And, you know, I think that remains to be seen. I think the album's got to, you know, simmer a little bit and let people digest it a little bit more, but I don't think that's a far-fetched idea. I think that's a very possible statement. One of the other songs that I wanted to just mention about this album is the song Beyond Me. That was a particularly emotional track to me. You know, they have a line in there about saying basically something to the effect of, it's simple, release what you hold dear, or so I fear, but it's beyond me and you'll be forever young. And that really just kind of hits you square in the feels on that one. You know, it's hard not to imagine that that was something written about Taylor and about, you know, him being forever young and things like that. You know, this is an album that I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on. I think it was worth mentioning that this is a super fantastic album, super strong. If you are a fan of the Foo Fighters, I think you will absolutely adore this album. It's one that, you know, we don't get a ton of super emotional rock albums anymore, but this is definitely one that qualifies in that category, and you know, I'm really happy with it. It's definitely one of my favorites that I've listened to this year for different reasons than most of my other favorites, but it's one that I think everybody needs to go listen to. So, But Here We Are by the Foo Fighters, go check it out. Next up, we got Till the Wheels Fall Off by WSTR. So this is one of those that I'm catching up on. It's one that I didn't get a chance to review in real time, but this is a band that I would say is a combination of pop punk with a little bit of skate punk and something that I would consider surf punk. And what I mean by that is these guys have a sound that really just make you want to be skating or surfing and having this kind of music on in the background. You know, it reminds me of those early 2000s video game vibes where, you know, whether it's Tony Hawk Underground or Tony Hawk Pro Skater or Supercross or whatever it may be, those types of soundtracks, this is exactly what I picture being on those types of games and being in the background when people are trying to skate and Supercross and all these things. So this was an album that I absolutely loved and was surprised that I loved. I knew about WSTR, you know, I've featured them in the playlist a few times with Poor Boy and Until Then, but I wasn't quite sure how I was going to react to a full album from them. And it was one that really stood out. And I can't, you know, I can't say enough about going back and re-listening to albums and listening to songs, because that's really what made this album stand out for me. One of the things that I wrote down about this album was that their song Jabo, which is like the third or fourth track on here, has what I would call a pop punk bleh. And my listeners, if you're into the alternative scene, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Motionless in White has probably some of the best, but it is something that's a lot softer than you would hear than, say, like a Motionless in White or somebody like that. And it's right in the beginning. You might not catch it, but it's right in the beginning of Jabo, and it's the pop punk version of what I would call that. So check that one out if you haven't heard that piece of it yet. Every song on this album is a jam. Like, there's no other way to describe this album than to say every song is a jam. I mean, one of my high points was Bot Lobby, and I love the chorus that they put in there that basically says, "Last night was lit till I got punched. I flip through tables when I'm drunk. Now I'm in the trash with the shit that he bought her." And it's just kind of like that progression throughout that chorus that makes it so much more entertaining to listen to. And you kind of get this visual in your head of somebody being really drunk at a party, they get punched, they get back up, then they fall through tables, and then they end up in the trash with all the stuff that this guy bought the girl that he's talking about. So love the little progression there in that chorus from WSCR. And really, this album checks all the boxes in terms of the topics that it covers as well. You know, it's got all of the classic punk, pop punk topics that everybody expects to hear. You have Bricks, which is all about like the loser kid vibes, along with Poor Boy. And then you have this Longing for a Girl song in Hyperactive. And in that song, Hyperactive, you have one of the cooler lines that I've seen in this album as well. It says, "So we converse, even if it's cryptically. I'm pouring out my heart while you leave me to bleed." And I love that line because that really makes you sit there and think, have you ever had a time where there's somebody that wants to talk to you, or you want to talk to this specific person, but maybe they don't want to be seen with you because, you know, you're in different crowds or different scenes or whatever. So you're talking kind of cryptically, but you don't want to be, you know, and that's basically one of those things where you're pouring your heart out to this person, then you're talking to them cryptically, but they're just basically leaving you like out in the dust to kind of fall by the wayside. So really cool line in there that makes you think a little bit. Like I said, this is one of those albums that really stood out to me upon second and third listen this week. And it was, like I said, it kind of crept up on me. It was not one that I expected to enjoy as much as I did, which is surprising. You know, I think that's probably one of the reasons that I put off reviewing it for as long as I did, because I figured it was probably one that may not get a full review on a podcast, or I'd only put a couple of other songs from the album on there. But going back and listening to it, you know, I think it's really right up there with me for some of my albums that I've liked a lot and have mentioned in album of the year contention. You know, I think it's right up there with Arrows in Action. I think it's right up there with Archetypes Collide, Sleep Token, and potentially even the next band that I'm going to talk about, which I promised a full review of for you guys, so stay tuned. But this is an album that continued to grow on me. It's an album that I think everybody that is really yearning for that late 2000s, mid 2000s pop punk vibes, I think this is one that you definitely need to check out, and it might satisfy a little bit of that taste that you're looking for. So, Till the Wheels Fall Off by WSTR, go check it out. Next up, as promised, is my full review for Gravity's Rainbow by Misfortune. So, on our last alternative podcast, I just briefly mentioned that this was one that I checked out, that I liked it a lot in the first listen, but I didn't have enough time to spend with it. So, spent a little bit more time with this album, so I wanted to talk about it a little bit more because there were a lot of things in this album that I really wanted to touch on, and mainly the lyricism that really stood out to me from Misfortune. There's plenty of relatable lyrics in this album, and one of the things that I noticed, and this is just me personally, is they are filling a void in my life that was left by Issues, that band, that we haven't had in a long time. They have a lot of a similar sound for me. They have a lot of the same kind of motion, but they also don't have the amount of screaming that Issues did. So that's something that I personally enjoy. I don't always love screams, but this was impressive. You know, it was one of those that, you know, Black Pixie is still probably my favorite off of this album, but I loved the lyricism in it when I got to go back and really dive into it even more. You know, there was a line in there that says, "I stayed silent, chose violence, and I never caught the wake." And then there's another line in it that says, "You'll be a good wife, you just need to give it a chance." And these are all just lines that really make you think a little bit deeper about maybe what the song is about. And I love that. I love being able to just think a little bit. Now, obviously, there are songs that aren't always going to be that, and not everybody wants to think about music. Most people just want to throw it on and just let it play, but I'm one of those people that I like to dig in a little bit deeper and kind of find some hidden meanings in there, or meanings that at least might be hidden for me. It doesn't necessarily have to be for everybody else. So Black Pixie was one of those for me. I had to laugh too because Misfortune really captures this day and age in a song like Matching Energies with their chorus. The chorus basically says, "You're canceled as fuck now." And that's a line that we would not have heard, you know, 10, 15 years ago in this scene, but it's one that makes a lot of sense right now because everybody talks about, you know, getting canceled or being canceled, or this person needs to be canceled, and to have that as a tagline in a song is just so witty, and I love that. I love that they were able to draw that in to a song like Matching Energies. And again, you know, I talk a lot about re-listening and songs emerging or songs being heard a different way. And that really happened for me on this album. A song called Too Cool to Be Cordial really emerged for me. And it was, again, another piece with lyricism in this. There's a line in there that says, "Of triggering anxiety and a mitigated disaster in this cold town," which, again, it's just the wordplay that you don't expect to see from bands that really stand out. You know, I didn't know exactly what to expect from Misfortune going into this album. I knew about them, but I hadn't listened to them in a while. So to get an album like this where there was a lot of lyricism in it, you know, this isn't like going into a Sleep Token album where you know that you're going to get a lot of these different things that you need to pay a lot of attention to, or these different lines that are going to really like spark that thought in your brain. That's exactly what happened for me in Misfortune's Gravity's Rainbow. I loved it that I was able to dive into that, you know, and it's the same thing in that Too Cordial to Care song. I keep saying that wrong. It's Too Cool to Be Cordial. Sorry, guys. It's the other line in there is, "You're never going to be my antagonist, but thanks for turning my life upside down." And that's such a witty way of saying to someone, I know you're never going to be that person in my life that's always there kind of challenging me, but you've already caused such an uproar that I have to at least thank you for turning that upside down. You know, it's just, it's a different way of expressing those feelings that, you don't really hear all that often. And I love that. There's one last thing that I wanted to touch on with this album, one last particular note on songs that I wanted to mention. And that is there's a production choice in Rolling Blackout at the very beginning. It's just a little guitar sound, and I don't even know how to make it, so I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to link it on the playlist. You guys can go listen to what I'm talking about. But there's a little production choice in there that's just so good and really drew me in. And hopefully you guys can catch it as well. It's right in the beginning. It's a little guitar lick or a little guitar note that you'll hear. And it's just so interesting to hear these little things that really spark your attention and draw you into a song like this one did with Rolling Blackout. Misfortune's album was one that I was drawn to immediately. Sometimes that happens with me with the aesthetics of an album in terms of album artwork, and that's exactly what happened with Gravity's Rainbow. The artwork drew me in and really had me intrigued as to what the sound was going to be. And after I was done, overall, this album is still one of my tops. Like I just mentioned with WSTR, it's definitely up there in the tops for the year. And it's one that I was glad to give a full review to on the podcast. I know we're still growing our community and there's still a lot of people out there that are finding us and listening to what we're reviewing, but this is an album that I feel like needs more publicity. It needs more reviews, more people talking about it. So I'm more than happy to talk about this album and give it some more promo because it really is that good. So go check out Gravity's Rainbow from Misfortune. Next album I'm going to talk about is Follow Noise from Superlove. This is my interesting album review of the week because Superlove's got a really different sound and does a lot of different production choices on this album that I'm not sure how you guys are going to feel about it. I really am not. This is a podcast that kind of really captures all of the different things in alternative music. As much as I am a pop punk fan, and that's really what I consider to be my wheelhouse. Obviously, we branch out into metalcore, we branch out into metal, hard rock. We looked at the Foo Fighters this week, which is more of a classic rock sound. I really couldn't tell you what genre Superlove falls into because there's a lot of different production choices, some that make it sound like pop punk, some that really just make it sound like a straight pop record, and that's interesting. And I don't know how people that listen to this type of music that I review on this podcast are going to react, so I'm interested to see. There's a lot of different vocal production on there. There's a slight auto-tune, which actually works in its favor. I really enjoy when they put that just tiny bit of auto-tune on that voice. They have a little bit of a Mayday Parade sound, but the way I would classify these guys is that if you're trying to figure out what it sounds like, I'm going to push you back into like the late 2010 area and think about a band like Breathe Carolina. That's kind of the sound that I was getting from them. At least that was my first thought. But I really do like this album. It was a fun listen. My clear favorite was Lifeline, and it's a simple song. It says, "You turn rain to sunshine, you are my lifeline." Like, it's just simple little things like that, but it's in such a upbeat, up-tempo way that it makes you really enjoy what you're listening to. I don't have a whole lot to say about it because I'm really just curious as to how other people are going to react to it. I don't see it being covered on a lot of the alternative stations or the alternative pods that I also, listen to, things like that. So I'm happy to talk about it. I'm happy to link some songs in the playlist here for you guys because I really think you're going to enjoy it if you give it a chance. So Follow Noise by Superlove, go check it out. And then our last EP that we're going to talk about, which is a late edition. They just made the cut because I'm recording this podcast a day late, but If We Go Down by First and Forever. So look, this just came out today. I've listened to it a few times today, and I love it, man. It's such a fun listen. It's so fun to hear First and Forever put these 5 songs together. And, we got 3 of them early, but the Bloody Mary song is one that if you follow me on Instagram, it's what I use to kind of just talk about the album or the EP a little bit. And If We Go Down is such a classic pop punk song to me. I haven't really dived into the lyrics or the meaning or anything like that. I've talked about Rivers on here already before, but this collection of 5 songs is some of the strongest pop punk that I've heard in a while. Pop punk, emo, however you want to classify it. This is, again, a way of really satisfying that craving that you have for some of those songs that we all grew up with. This is a perfect sound, and I love First and Forever's sound. I'm so happy that we got a couple of new songs here from them. I'm excited to see how this EP does. I'm excited to see how everybody reacts to it, because I think this is another one of those stepping stones for a band like First and Forever that can really catapult them into the next level and really push them as a staple of this new pop punk scene. And hopefully everybody else sees it the way I do, that these guys are stars in the making. But if you haven't heard it yet, go check out If We Go Down from First and Forever. That wraps up our album reviews this week, but we're going to head on over and do our singles, with the first one being Lost As I Am by Imbalance California. So I say Imbalance California because they show up as Imbalance CA. I think their band name is really just Imbalance, but brand new band. This is their debut single. I absolutely love their sound. They're off of Happy Haunting Records, which is a new record label out there in California. And I'm excited to hear more from these guys. They announced that their album's going to be out on August 11th. Really looking forward to hearing that, because this first track really has my interest peaked on these guys, and can't wait to hear this new record. So Lost As I Am by Imbalance. Go check it out. Next up, we got Smoking Gun from Forever on High. Another debut single, and this is a little bit of a Blink Sum 41 sound if you're looking for something to compare it to. Another band that I'm really intrigued by and I'm really excited to hear more from. You know, it's really rare to have a week where I have at least 2 brand new bands with debut singles that this is their first release into the world, and both of them really blew me away. So Smoking Gun by Forever on High, go check them out. Next up, we got Heart of Stone from Cemetery Sun. So I saw a little story about this track, that basically they've had this track written for 5 years and they've gone through 5 different versions, and then finally just this past week they've released it out into the public. This is one of my favorite tracks of the week. I think everybody's gonna love a track like this. So Heart of Stone from Cemetery Sun, go check it out. Next up, we got Bathroom Floor from Sophie Powers. This is that classic angsty sound that I think everybody loves, and especially everybody loves when they're looking for some of that nostalgic pop punk that I talk about all the time. I love that this track is talking all about those classic things like looking for validation and other things like that. Really excited to see what else Sophie's got up her sleeves, so go check out Bathroom Floor from Sophie Powers. Next up, we got Studio Apartment from Marlhy. This is my most played track over the past few weeks since we all last got together. Marlhy's voice is perfect on this track. The subject matter is so relatable, and that's what makes it so much fun to listen to. You know, I think this track particularly, when we talk about potential commercial or mainstream appeal, Studio Apartment really drives home that ability to get somebody on mainstream radio that is from our scene and from our genre. I think Studio Apartment would be a perfect radio single if Marlhy was going to ever try to go to radio. So go check out Studio Apartment from Marlhy. Next track is Fuck California from Friend Circle. The boys from Friend Circle just continue to impress, continue to put out quality tracks, and really just have me excited for, I believe, a June 30th drop for an album, I think is the right date for that. I'm excited for that album. One of my more exciting albums, one of the albums that I'm looking forward to the most in the next couple of months, next couple of weeks. So Fuck California from Friend Circle, go check it out. Next up, we got Little by Little by As December Falls. As December Falls is one of those bands that I really feel is underrated and undervalued in this scene. I feel like they capture all of the essences that everybody's looking for. I feel like they have everything that you look for in a new band, or a newer band, I should say. And they have the great sound, they have great vocals, the aesthetics for their album artwork is always on point. So excited to see where they go from here. So Little by Little by As December Falls, go check it out. Next up, we got Childhood Eyes from Yellowcard, a return single from Yellowcard. It's on a little bit of the lighter side is what I will say. It's a little bit softer than things that we've heard from Yellowcard in the past, but Let's be honest, anytime we get a band like Yellowcard back in the scene, it's great to have them back. So go check out Childhood Eyes by Yellowcard. Next up, we got Demons from If Not For Me. This is another one of my new discoveries. I feel a little late to the party with these guys, but better late than never. I love this track, Demons. I think everybody else will as well. So go check out Demons from If Not For Me. And our last track of the week, another late entry thanks to the delay in recording of this podcast, is Again from 408. You know, the 408 boys are just up there with Magnolia Park. I feel like I've talked about them a bunch on this podcast, but this is another one of those tracks that I think they're just trying to outdo themselves in terms of potential Song of the Summer candidates, because that's exactly what this song is. It's a Song of the Summer candidate. Everybody's going to love this high tempo, subject matter, everything. So go check out Again from 408. That wraps it up for our single reviews, and let's jump right into our tour announcements. So I wanted to mention this one because I know I have listeners from all over the world. Bad Omens announced their UK tour with support from Bring Me the Horizon, Static Dress, and Cassette. If that tour ever makes it to the United States, you might as well just take my money now, because that is going to be one of the top tours in the States if it ever gets over here. But in the meantime, go check out any of their UK dates if you're interested. The next tour that we got is Nothing Nowhere with Static Dress, See You Space Cowboy, and Unity. That's another big one. Static Dress getting 2 mentions here. They're on 2 tours. Love that for them. We had a tour announcement from Front Bottoms and the Wonder Years. Another tour announcement from Bearings with Just Friends, with support from Youth Fountain and Young Culture. That's an interesting one. I'm going to try and check that one out when they come to my area. And then another one that was just announced today that, again, I'm feeling like you might as well just take my money now, but it is Senses Fail with support from Holding Absence and Thousand Below. And that is just a stacked lineup for a show. Could not be more excited to potentially go see that one. That one is one that I'm definitely looking at getting tickets for. So those are your tour announcements, and that wraps it up for us here on the Matrix Music Review podcast this week. I hope everybody enjoyed. I hope everybody is going to go check out all these different tracks and albums that I mentioned. These are all really, really strong this week. As always, if you like what we're doing over here at Matrix Music Review, the best thing you can do to keep supporting us is to leave us a good review, leave us a comment, interact with us on any of our social medias, and make sure that you're sending this podcast out to friends so that they know about the pod. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Matrix Music Review. I'm on Instagram all the time, posting all of the new songs, new tour announcements, anything like that. You can interact with me there. Head on over to Spotify and like the playlist, stay up to date on all of the music that I'm listening to. And as always, for my Spotify listeners, we are going to end this episode with an artist playing us out. And this week, it's going to go to Studio Apartment from Marlhy.